All right, YouTube, Occult Literature video number 17, Psychedelic Spirituality. This is a work that I myself wrote. It's not something that I just edited. It's 147 pages, so it's short-ish, full-length work, far longer than many of the grimoires and other occult manuscripts that I end up editing. Most of those are under 100 pages. As always, link in the description to where you can find this work on Amazon. I'm the only one offering it because I'm the one who wrote it. And then a second link to my books blog as well, where this and other works are listed, maintenance ongoing. I hope to get that done before the end of tomorrow. My hope may be misplaced there. It depends on my workload on other things. Psychedelic spirituality really is my first foray into the not strictly herbal side of psychedelia. I included within Fruits of Eden, of course, there is a chapter on mind-altering substances. Spirits of the Garden covers the topic to some degree. But I wanted a dedicated work specifically for the spiritual side of psychedelics, not all as it relates to herbalism. Now, it contains multiple different chapters, multiple sort of ideas within its core. Not simply just a list of psychotropics, what they do. Yes, that is here. But I wanted to get a little bit into my own experiences as well. I talk about my use of morning glory, Amanita muscaria, and so forth, sort of the spiritual side of what happened as well as the physical side. It is one part trip report in that respect for that section. Sort of what were the mundane, the physical effects, but how did it affect my spirituality, my outlook on life, things like that. I thought it was important because I can't just have videos about these topics. I wanted to put it in writing. I wanted to have an actual text, something physical people can hold in their hand, read on a rainy day or something. I also wanted to cover my own thoughts on like the stoned ape theory of McKenna, the idea that human development has been significantly impacted by psychedelics. I happen to agree largely with the theory. I don't think that it's the only thing driving anthropological development, but I do think it plays a fairly major role. Really, you get a bunch of cave people completely stoned out of their minds. They probably are going to change their behavior. And evolution works on the basis what works is retained, what doesn't work is not retained at any given time. It's essentially the sum and substance unless something goes haywire, some mutation goes totally wrong. But I also wanted to cover some of the different spiritual groups and their own feelings on it. For instance, I tell the tale of the Siberians and Amanita use there. How at first, they literally just gathered the mushrooms and got high off them. Somebody realized that the reindeer were getting high too, and somehow, I don't want to know exactly how this happened, somebody figured out that if you drank their urine, I don't know, maybe somebody was like really, really thirsty, there was nothing else to drink, and they didn't want to melt a pot of snow because they were all so cold. So they just said fuck it, and they drank the reindeer urine, then they got really, really high because the reindeer had just had amanitas. They realized they hadn't ingested any of the mushrooms. They deduced, of course, hey, the urine after the deer takes it also gets you high, through a little bit of unfortunate trial and error. So then it became more standardized, and then eventually their shaman took hold. Their shaman. I know some people jump on me for pronunciations. I've got a Connecticut River accent, so I can't help it. Took over and started dispensing it as a sacrament in much the same way the Catholic Church does. You can see a loose connection because, of course, early Christianity, you don't have to ask a priest for forgiveness. You're literally just praying to God. Then the priests begin giving the sacrament out. So they can deny it to people, send them to hell if they don't follow the rules or something. The rules as they wanted them to follow it because the Romans were legalistic. The Siberians succumbed to basically the same concept. I wanted to talk as well about my notations on the concept of the interplay between hedonism, Epicureanism, asceticism, and so forth, as it applies to psychedelics. Because what I realized is stoner culture really has more in common with the Just Say No crowd than it does with psychonaut culture. I go into a little bit of detail about that as well. And as it ties into the occult, of course, we've got witching oil, witching ointment, which was essentially a hallucinogen witches anointed themselves with to see visions. We've got Celis demarking it within demonology. We've got all sorts of references to the psychedelic world. within magic, within any variant of the occult. It doesn't matter if it's Eastern or Western, it seems to always be present in some form. We look at, for instance, we look at Homer's Odyssey, we see the island of the lotus eaters. We do know that there is Nymphaea cerulea, which is a type of blue lotus, which when ingested in a large enough quantity is a hypnotic and a sedative. It almost fits the description of the plant perfectly. It's a lotus that causes you to get sleepy. I couldn't think of something that's more fitting, and it does happen to be native to these general regions where Homer would have actually been wandering around. I would think, by the way, this helps bear out the concept that at some point somebody did have such a trip. There really was a Homer in some form or another. I'm not saying I believe in Cyclops or any of these other things or Circe, but something certainly gave rise to this overall story. But overall, I just wanted to create a tract, a book of sorts, a fairly short book, but full length nonetheless, something that contains my opinions on the subject, because I'm used to reading and listening to as well other people's opinions. I wanted to synthesize them for my own, because I think that my feelings on the subject, they're based more on my understanding perhaps of the occult in a more strictly occult light, separated from like New Age, specifically psychonaut culture, whereas some of the other treatises, it's like crystals and orbs and stuff like that. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with machine elves and quartz crystals. I really don't. I think that's fine. But you gotta have other opinions as well. You've got to have other angles from which to analyze the use of psychedelics. I also wanted to go into why the drug war failed. I wanted to have a little bit of political content here as well. And my understanding of why it failed isn't based on like criminology, it's based on anthropology. So I think it's perhaps, again, slightly different from most of the material on the subject. I also think that it has to do with the noble savage mythology. I dragged that in towards the end of the work and attempt to analyze that as well, specifically the way in which people view the drug use, the drug war, sort of the anthropological impacts, really deals with the noble savage. It's no different from that. It's literally Wild West sort of noble Injun versus drunken white man who gambles all day sort of stuff. It really is present. You may not want to believe it, but one look at Hollywood and their depictions of different mind-altering substances, and you will quite clearly see it's definitely true. So yeah, Psychedelic Spirituality is available, link in the description to the Amazon page for this work and a second for my books blog. I hope you're interested in this work. It was fun to write as well. Some works, it's more actual like work to edit my way through them or to write them, and I'm just doing it because I need to do something. Others, I have quite a bit of fun. This was one of the more fun works. Along like Spirits of the Garden was fun too. That was probably the most fun I had actually writing anything other than morbid stories. That's about all. Peace out.